I'm a pastor with a heart and a passion for evangelism that I got the day I met Jesus. My church is the streets, locally and globally, and I just carry his burning heart for the lost. I didn't come to Christ until I was 39. My testimony is a little bit different from most because I wasn't seeking God. There just came a time, January 8th, 1996. I know the day Jesus began chasing me down the street with miracles. And I thought I was fine. I thought I didn't need God or religion. I grew up an unbeliever. I had a single mom, inner city. And I decided the way I would get out of this situation is that I would use education to get a good job, beat the system, which worked for me. I got a business administration, finance, accounting degree at UC Berkeley Business School, and it earned me the American dream, a six-figure income in San Francisco, a Norman Rockwell neighborhood, great kids, happily married, and I thought I beat the system. But looking back, I feel like what I see is that God was knocking on my door pretty much all my life. And probably, truth be told, whereas I just told you, I thought I was fine. I probably wasn't as fine as I thought I was. I really thought I had a perfect life. I tried churches, but they were talking hell and damnation, turn or burn. And I walked out, self righteously. I walked out. I thought, keep it to yourself. I'm out of here. I'm not what you're talking about. God began giving me, again, I didn't know who he was, open visions. Like, I didn't know who Jesus was. And they began to play out like in front of me, like these epic movies. And I used to say, and this was 1996, and nobody around me, everybody would say, God no longer talks. I was still in a world where people, if I asked them, and I didn't yet because I wasn't in church, would have said that God no longer talks. He stopped talking when the Bible was written. So this next vision, I was on a cliff, like, and get this, because you'll recognize that I was on a cliff and my friends and family were behind me. And I was in front of one of those horrible rope bridges over that crevice, however you say it. And it was those horrible rope bridges I don't like to be on. And knew I was leaving everyone behind. And I looked behind them like, you want to come with me? And nobody, you know, said yes. So I stepped out on the bridge alone, knowing that I was, and it was shrouded in fog. I didn't know where it was going. And then it just stopped. And that was January 8th, 1996, when I stepped out on that bridge. And I didn't know yet then that that is the classic salvation tract picture that people hand out, where there's, a crevice and two cliffs, and the only way to cross is Jesus. But again, he was showing me all these things that I had no idea was part of the Word of God and part of, our Christian heritage. So people began to get worried because I was talking to this voice that I sensed was God. I had like so many best friends. We had this sweet life. Our kids were little. We were doing all these things together. And I just began to retreat from that. And they were like, "Where are you going?" And, I said, "I think I'm going on a journey. Will you come with me?" And they're like, "No. Thank you." And so they sent me to a Christian counselor. And when I walked out of her office, and I saw an invitation to a silent retreat, and I said, I need to be there. Long, long story. But that Saturday, there I was at a Catholic convent at a silent retreat. And God gave me another open eye vision. But this one was different. This is more like what I later learned, 2 Corinthians 12, like Paul saying, I was caught up in a vision and into paradise. And I wasn't sure if I was in the body or out of the body, but it was so all encompassing. I was in the Revelation 5 um, throne room with Jesus. And I was transported to heaven, and I met him, eyes of fire, voice of many waters, iridescent white robes. And I was a 3-year-old. And the first thing I said to God was, what is the big idea of this? And I was referring to the world and, child abuse and violence and, stuff that, if you're God, Why, what is going on here?" And I heard the audible voice that still rocks me today. He just looked at me and from the throne and he said, "I know." I mean, that resonant voice. And he picked me up and he put me on his lap and he enveloped me in his arms. And that is when the electricity of the manifest presence of God just began to permeate every cell of my body. And he was just changing me. And I was weeping uncontrollably. I was falling in love with this God. He took my head and he laid it against his heart and he recalibrated my heartbeat to his. And then he lifted my head and I looked into those eyes of fire and they just began pouring this hot lava love into my eyes. And I was just, when he says, fix your eyes on Jesus, that's what that is for me. And it just filled me from the top of my head, actually from the bottom of my feet, all through me. And I was gone. My world faded to gray. And I I, I had the bridegroom paradigm. I knew that I was forever his and I needed to be with him. I'm getting overwhelmed. I feel it. It's more a feeling like right now I have that feeling. This fire just starts in my belly and wells up through my heart. Like I feel like I have smoke coming out of my ears, but he just said in a very resonant, he looked at me and said, "I know." And it was, I know, he knew, but he knows my pain. He knows my question. He knows what he's going to do with my life. I don't know any of that. I'm not thinking. He picks me up and envelops me, and he is changing my DNA. So, because of that, I read the Bible very differently. We read it as theology, I read it as somebody who recorded the experience that I had. It's experiential, the Word of God. Does that make sense? And so when I read it, finally got around to reading the Word of God, which I had said to that counselor, she said, "Can I read Psalms to you?" I said, "Could you not? It just makes me grit my teeth. Like, please, no." And, and then I didn't realize that that is who I met. And then what he said is, "I will make you a fisher of men." I had no idea what that meant. You know what? When God speaks, he answered every question. I His presence answered every question because he's God. Yep. Yep. So not long after that, God launched me into ministry and evangelism, and I found myself on a corner in the Tenderloin, which is the worst square mile of San Francisco. This is the worst square mile where the homeless is the worst, the addiction, the corruption, the alcoholism. It's down there, and I'm on that corner. God says to me, "See that guy?" I look down the street, and look at me. I don't belong with these drug addicts, alcoholics, homeless. I look down the street and there's a guy coming down the street and he goes, "See that guy? He belongs to me. Go get him." I'm like, what does that mean? Okay. So I go up to this guy and I say, "Hey, God highlighted you and he wants me to bless you. Can I pray for you?" And he looks at me and he says, yeah. A minute ago, I was lying on Market Street on the cable car tracks, waiting to be run over by the cable car. I was about to commit suicide. And a voice said to me, "Get up and go down the street." And when I did, you called out to me. I played to an audience of one. Like, I don't care what others think of me, but I do. Sometimes it hurts. But I try. And then ministry to the one, little O-N-E, he'll say, "See that guy? He belongs to me. Go get them." And that is the ministry of Christ. It is the Great Commission.